Yesterday, Mom and I watched Matt Bike, Dreamy Eyes, and then we rewatched Ko Ha Lan, Ms. Ha Lan, and felt so utterly disappointed with her story. So, I ended up doing a little interview with my dad about how he used to court my mom back in the day. It's quite an interesting story, so today I'll gather those bits and pieces to share with you all. It's a love story from 1999, and it goes like this. My mom, back then, was quite a catch. She was beautiful, a teacher, gentle, and knew how to sew and embroider. She was a teacher at a primary school, living in the teacher's dormitory. There were a few other single female teachers there, just like her, all living together. So, in the evenings, groups of young men would come over to chat and flirt. Those who liked each other would announce it, then break away to talk privately. Otherwise, they'd just keep talking as a group. Among them was one of Dad's friends who saw Mom and fell head over heels for her. But Mom was quite valuable, sought after, busy, and didn't really entertain anyone. So, Dad's friend, feeling defeated, told Dad about a beautiful teacher at Fulak Primary School, Mom, whom he couldn't win over. He also mentioned there were other pretty teachers there, asking Dad if he wanted to go along and try his luck. Dad, seeing an opportunity with many pretty girls, agreed. So Dad, lured by the idea of many pretty girls, went with his friend to Mom's dorm complex that evening to try his hand at courting. Oh, the moment Dad saw Mom, it was like lightning struck. Love at first sight, completely captivating him. But Mom, according to her, wasn't interested in dating at all back then. She felt she was still young, wanted to enjoy a few more years, and wasn't ready for a serious relationship. So she didn't pay much attention to Dad, just giving him curt, often non-committal replies. But who was Dad? They say, a persistent suitor never gives up. And Dad was the epitome of persistence. No matter how Mom rebuffed him, he would still show up diligently at her dorm complex to talk to her. Back then, there were no water pumps. You had to draw water from the well yourself. So, Dad would come and draw water for Mom. He'd even bring her thoughtful gifts like gloves and scarves. He was so considerate, always reminding her, if it's your period, don't touch cold water, and so on. Dad was relentless, and after a long time of his relentless pursuit, Mom finally gave in. Dad's persistence paid off. Mom's dorm wasn't even close to Dad's house. Dad lived in the outskirts of town, while Mom's dorm was deep in a remote village, about 10 kilometers away. Back then, motorbikes weren't common, there were only a few. Dad didn't own a motorbike. He lived with his uncle and would borrow his uncle's bike every evening to go courting. 10 kilometers back then wasn't like 10 kilometers today. The roads were mostly dirt paths, incredibly rough and winding, especially when it rained, making them extremely difficult to navigate. Yet Dad still came regularly. So Mom thought, all right, he seems okay. Let's give it a try and see how it goes. So after a few months of Dad's persistent courting, Mom finally agreed to date him. Back then, Dad was quite funny looking, with his hair not fully black yet, riding a dream motorbike and wearing bell-bottom pants, the wider the better. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Mom often told me that as soon as dinner was over, Dad would already be waiting outside the gate. Their courtship was pretty amusing too, very old-fashioned. Back then, movies weren't as bold as they are now, and adults' relationships were also quite conservative. They only held hands months after officially becoming a couple. Their first kiss? Mom, who used to read romance novels and watch movies, had such high hopes for a sweet, tender first kiss. But when she kissed Dad, she said she ended up biting his lip until it bled. To this day, Mom still recounts, I almost swallowed your dad's mouth when I kissed him back then. During Mom and Dad's time, dating was quite quaint. The internet wasn't popular, and there were no pagers or anything to message or see each other frequently. They'd only meet once every day or two, and even then, only for about an hour and a half, always in the evening. Back then, they would write each other long, heartfelt love letters. When they met, instead of saying much, they'd simply exchange these letters, full of I miss you and I love you. Even now, Mom and Dad still keep those old letters, probably a whole stack. Those old folks were just incredibly romantic, living with their heads in the clouds. Telephones weren't common either, so whenever they missed each other, Dad would borrow his uncle's landline to call Mom's dorm. The person who answered would then have to relay the message to Mom to come to the phone. Dating was hard, Mom said, but it was so much fun. They'd spend all day missing each other, only to meet in the evening. Sometimes, they'd only see each other once every 3 or 4 days, not only because of the distance, but also because Dad had to borrow a bike. but it was incredibly joyful. Both Mom and Dad were originally from Ha Tin, but they didn't know each other there because their hometowns were in two very distant districts. They only met when they both moved south for work. Since neither of them lived with their parents, Mom would leave the dorm on weekends to stay at her uncle's house. Her uncle's house was closer to Dad's, only about 5 kilometers away. So, Dad would become her chauffeur, picking Mom up from the dorm and taking her to her uncle's house. Mom said dating back then wasn't like it is now. In the evenings, Dad wouldn't just drop her off and stand outside. He would go right into her uncle's house, politely ask for permission to take her out, saying, "Uncle, may I take her out? I'll bring her back before 9 p.m." And that's how they'd go out together. Back then, there weren't many places to go on dates. They mostly just went to places like the lakefront, enjoyed the breeze, and talked about sweet nothings. Mom said they'd hold hands, and her face would just flush bright red. It was so funny. And so, Mom and Dad continued their courtship like that. From 1999 to 2000, they finally got married. Then in 2001, I was born. So, that's the story of how my dad courted and married my mom. For the next part how they raised and loved me, I'll save that for another time. Stay tuned.